The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the show, please do make sure to subscribe and also feel free to share and like as you wish. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Sanya Mondoh, who is a legal expert with a particular interest and expertise in blockchain and smart contracts. Brian will shortly be heading towards the University of Nottingham to work on a PhD around blockchain and procurement, particularly public procurement. So I'm delighted to have him available to pick his brains on all things around blockchain, smart contracts, and even decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, which is a new buzzword to me, but a very interesting concept. So join us as we chat about all of those things in this episode of the Aquest Podcast.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, Brian. You're very welcome to the Aquest Podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm equally excited and ready to rock and roll.
Ready to rock and roll. Well, I'm sure you are the guest from the most exotic location that we've had so far, being in Trinidad.
Yes, Trindad and Tobago, yes.
There's a TV show over here. It's a BBC show called Death in Paradise. I don't know if it ever makes its way to your side of the world, but it's set in an idyllic Caribbean island, but obviously involves in every episode a murder of complicated natures. So I think a lot of people in this part of the world have great fondness for what it might be like to live in the Caribbean.
Wow, that's not the most idyllic thing to be watching, but yeah, it's Trinidad is a nice place, and everything happens everywhere. So I will not put any negative attachments to my island, but I guess that's there's some things that come with island living. It's a chilled out life. We enjoy the sun, we enjoy our rum, and we enjoy our life as it comes.
But notwithstanding that, you're shortly to be joining us over here in this part of the world, heading to Nottingham for a PhD. Tell us a bit about the PhD and your area of expertise.
Right. So I will be starting my PhD at the University of Nottingham with the Public Procurement Research Group in September 2022. And my area of PhD will be focused on the use of blockchain in public procurement. So there was a green paper that was released sometime in 2020 talking about adverse changes in procurement law in England and Wales. And the UK, this was post-Brexit. It moved from the EU regime and wanted to have something for itself. So it's looking at things like having a central database system, use of innovative technology and such things. But what I found is in their responses, they did not look at the fourth industrial revolution, technology that's being used in the fourth industrial revolution. And this includes things like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and most of all, blockchain and smart contracts, because this is where the disruption is. So blockchain has positioned itself as a very disruptive technology. And just before I go on with that, blockchain is classified under what you call distributed ledger technologies. So it's basically a ledger, but this uses some computer science. So it's an immutable ledger that uses cryptographic signatures and hash functions. So it makes it an append-only ledger. So once the data is written on it, it's immutable, it's tamper resistant. So transactions are essentially grouped in things called blocks, and each block includes information from the previous block, and it's chained together in such a sequence. So that's why the distributed ledger is called a blockchain. So it's basically information from block one is linked to block 2, to block 3, and so forth. So if any information in, let's say, block 2 is changed by a bad actor, all the blocks show that there's something that's trying to be done to the block. So it's a very transparent technology, and this is why I thought of it as something that will assist with procurement fraud and in terms of data management, because it's also decentralized. And by decentralized, we mean there isn't a single point of failure. So it's an open network that's distributed across the world with across peer networks. A peer network basically means everybody is equal on the network. So you can be a reader and a writer at the same time. And there's no single point of failure, meaning even if one node on the peer-to-peer network collapses, everybody still has a copy of the entire ledger. So the show still goes on. So that's the long and short of it. So I thought this would be very innovative, very disruptive to have this in the public sector, because, especially during the COVID procurement times, there was talk about lots of fraud or big boy political influence in transactions and whatever it is. I don't want to get into that sector of politics, but this is just a technology that's sort of bringing trustless transactions and adding a bit of confidence in everyday sort of transactions.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian, because typically when outsiders like myself hear about blockchain, it's usually in the context of cryptocurrencies and I guess Bitcoin in particular. And a lot of the news stories, or the stories that make their way into more mainstream news when it comes to crypto, is around fraud and bad actors and money laundering and things like that. But actually, part you say with blockchain, it's based in cryptography, which is all about making it very difficult to commit a fraud. So it is actually, you get beyond the noise, it is actually an incredibly secure and safe way to do what I guess you're hoping you might be able to do in the procurement sector and in other areas in terms of creating records that are immutable and not possible for people to go in and tamper with and create a fraud.
Yes, totally. And just on that point, I would like to amplify what you said and to clarify as well that people know crypto. They don't know that the underpinning technology is blockchain. And cryptocurrencies and blockchains, without using the name blockchains, existed for a while, but they only came out in, let's say, a finalized way in 2008 after a man called Satoshi Nakamoto solved something called the double spend problem. So this is what he says in his white paper. We've proposed a system for electronic transactions based on cryptographic proof without relying on trust. We started with the usual framework of coins made from digital signatures, which provides strong control of ownership, but it's incomplete without a way to prevent double spending. So to solve this, we proposed a peer-to-peer network using proof of work. So proof of work is it's a consensus algorithm. So it's a system where you have people called miners. So a transaction is broadcasted in the system, and then there's a computational puzzle that's being done by the miners. And when the puzzle has been solved, the transaction is added to the block, and the miner is given an incentive, is rewarded using Bitcoins. So this is how it started. So the interrelation has to be understood, that the Bitcoin protocol is made from blockchain. So blockchain is not Bitcoin.
Without giving any secrets away, Brian, on your work in terms of blockchain and procurement, what is it that, or how do you envisage a use case and the use for blockchain, particularly in relation to procurement?
Right. So essentially, if you look at it from a point of view of supply chain and procurement, because supply chain and procurement are very interrelated, because one lives in the other and such thing. So it's in terms of data organization. You have everybody coming to one place, putting in their records, and everything is transparent on the blockchain. So if there is, let's say, a tender, a bid evaluation or something, all the information is on the chain. You can't have people coming to add records that are not on the blockchain, because it will be known. And in terms of, let's say, information requests, ordinarily you have to make an FOIA application to get X and Y sort of information. But on the blockchain, all this information is there, because this is what the blockchain does. It brings out full transparency, okay? But at the same time, there's tensions with the laws of privacy and data protection, and also with the GDPR actually, because let's say there's the right to erase a ledger if there's a mistake, and the blockchain is immutable. How do you append something that, how do you amend a mistake? How do you delete it if it's out there already? You see, if a contract is supposed, let's say terms of the contracts, the clauses have to be updated or deleted or something in terms of contractual negotiations. So how do you do that when it's already deployed on the blockchain? So this is my sort of study. So the blockchain, yes, it brings out trust, transparency, and confidence, but at the same time, it has tensions. Who owns the data when it's on the blockchain? How does it interrelate with the GDPR? How does it, in terms of money laundering and such things? Yeah, so how literally, yeah, it's an overall understanding of the blockchain system. So we can't look at the blockchain system in supply chain and procurement in parts. You have to look at it as a whole, because the blockchain is quite intricate. This is, I normally tell people, it's like electricity. So the use case is so wide and varied, even within a particular use case, because the blockchain is used to write data, but you have smart contracts that are self-executing codes as well. So you see the smart contracts are doing something extra from what the blockchain does.
Okay, I want to come to smart contracts in a second. I'm guessing, Brian, that you're the guy who's going to figure out the answers to the questions about, the interrelationship with something like GDPR, and how do you correct mistakes when you've got an immutable record, and how do you delete, and how do you change if it's contrary to the whole blockchain methodology that you would do that kind of thing. As a former public servant, I had occasion to dabble in procurement or touch it, but it was never a very pleasant and easy experience. I wonder whether using blockchain makes it better for users, both in terms of organizations that are looking to procure and firms that are looking to submit tenders. Please, Brian, tell me it's going to be easier.
Right. So blockchain simplifies the steps. So if in procurement you have 100 steps, blockchain, let's say, I'm not saying this in exactness, but let's say it reduces 100 steps to probably 30 steps. That's progress, especially. So in terms of data management, in terms of payments, so let's say with smart contracts, which we're heading to, so once the documents are on the blockchain and let's say some of the conditions are fulfilled, then it triggers the next event, which is, let's say, a payment or whatever. So the smart contract says, if this happens, then the next thing happens. That's what the blockchain does.
So in a procurement,
So it simplifies the process.
Brian, smart contracts are like protocols that sit over the blockchain and say, well, if A plus B plus C happens, well, then we move to the next phase, as you said. So I guess
exactly, yeah.
When we're thinking about procurement, you might say, well, here are the criteria for assessment of the various submissions for the tenders. And so you get X amount of points for price and Y for experience. And so you throw them through the algorithm, and it'll determine that A plus B plus C means that firm X has won the contract. And then you move to the phase, which is either you confirm dates, or you have other service contract, or you have a payment due, or something like that.
Exactly. And even in terms of getting real-time information, so there's things like oracles, which get actual information from the outside off-chain world and feed it to the smart contract. So the smart contract is always putting in accurate information, because you see, blockchain won't solve the problem if you feed the blockchain with wrong information. Wrong is equals wrong. Okay, so when you use oracles and the Internet of Things, which gets inaccurate information from out there and feeds it to the smart contracts and record it on the blockchain, this is where the value proposition comes in. And for example, I'll give you a use case. So IBM had a study it was conducting, and they were shipping some stuff from Kenya to, some flowers actually, from Kenya to England. So you're able to track the exact parcel of flowers. If they're spoiled or whatever, it makes recollection easy. Or if there are multiple suppliers to this tender, you can know whose batch of whatever is not of good quality and whose is satisfactory. So it makes, from a commercial sense, like ascertaining the goods are of quality or not of quality or whatever, like it makes everything more accessible. It just gives you that ease of transaction,
Yeah. And is that information gathered via sensors, or is it some physical inspection where an input is entered to say, I have viewed that shipment of flowers and I've determined that they're spoiled or they're in perfect condition? How does that information get from the consignment into the system?
Okay, so human input will always somehow be there. So there's the devices, okay? So let's say on the box of flowers, you have a barcode or a QR code that has to go through, let's say, a QR code reader. So the QR code reader, let's say if the flowers have moved from Mombasa, the port of Mombasa, to the port of Ireland, the customs officer at Ireland, he uses his QR code reader to say, okay, I've received this. And let's say within the warehouse, the Internet of Things devices, which have sensors, will tell you, this is the temperature the flowers are in, this is the current level. So there's that interaction between the two. So there'll be human input at some point, like let's say holding the QR code reader, or it could also be fully automated. So if it's on a conveyor belt and whatever, and there's a sensor there, when it moves, the data is recorded, because we're looking at full automation. So we are just reducing the human input. And that's also what the smart contracts do. You are reducing human input by using self-executed codes.
And so when you direct your mind then to the possibilities for the deployment of blockchain and smart contracts in the financial services world, which is where myself and my colleagues live, what do you see there as the kind of most immediate use cases and deployments that we're likely to see, or that you've come across?
In terms of blockchains and smart contracts?
Mm-hmm.
Right. In terms of blockchains and smart contracts, you can see decentralized finance, for example, because decentralized finance, this is the second evolution of blockchains. From the Bitcoin protocol, you now had the Ethereum protocol in around 2016, and they brought in smart contracts. So this took finance to the next level. So it's sort of removing the need of a third-party institution or a gatekeeping house like a bank, a central bank, to giving financial freedom to the network participant. So you control your money, you have custody. So things like custody and Danny, you're the banker here. So things that traditional finance institutions do have all been sort of moved into simpler steps using smart contracts. So they can perform any sort of obligation as long as the code is properly written and the conditions have been fulfilled. So you're saying smart contracts in that. And then smart contracts have also evolved further into things called Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. So basically DAOs are, as they're called, it's a cluster of smart contracts. And DAOs have come to evolve corporate governance. So instead of having a traditional company, a director and a company secretary and the whole shebang, the whole traditional shebang, you have people investing in a project, let's say the Danny DAO, and the Danny DAO is about improving water services in Ireland. So people invest in the Danny DAO, and let's say you come up with like £1 million, and we say with this £1 million, let's say you've invested £10,000. So everybody has a different level of investment. So it goes into this pool and tokens are issued depending on what you've invested. And it allows you to forward proposals. So like, let's say we want to see red water in whatever form. So people they vote on the protocol and say, we want this, we want that. And it's all based on smart contracts.
So you're kind of laying the conditions in that instance for investment in advance. So you'll say, here are the parameters for how we will take the money that you've invested and deploy it in water infrastructure or whatever it is. It has to
Yes.
be C and D. And because
Yes.
you've determined all of this in advance and it's objective and presumably measurable,
Yes.
there's no need for human intervention in between there's no opportunity for manipulation or
Exactly.
in the sense that you can only invest in accordance with the protocol and rules that you've agreed when you establish.
Exactly. So unless there's let's say something called a fork. So a fork is when, let's say, the people in the protocol don't agree on a proposal. You find some people going the other way. So you, let's say, have now the Danny DAO A and Danny DAO B.
Yeah.
So it splits. It's a bit technical to explain without diagrammatic assistance, but it's also, the code is not 100, and it's susceptible to bugs, and it's the understanding, the comprehension of computer language of natural language into computer language is also difficult, because there are some things that are hard to explain on code, because code is very rigid. So you still need some sort of wiggle room.
Yes.
But But recently in England, the Law Commission, it published a document on the use of smart legal contracts. So there's a small there's a nuance. So there's smart contracts and smart legal contracts. So smart contracts are not per se legally enforceable, but now you have smart legal contracts which could be legally enforceable as long as the terms of the contract are precise. So you're applying the principles of contractual law in smart code. So there's this advancement in technology. Yes.
And could you conceive then of, let's say, an investment product, so a fund product that has in advance a smart contract and has its protocols written around what are the eligible securities or other types of investment it'll invest in, what are the parameters around valuation, so how will the securities be valued, parameters around the liquidity of the underlying, so it has to have a certain amount of liquidity in order for it to pass through the smart contracts and be eligible, and really all of the rules that we would typically see in our world of financial services and investment funds that are at the moment would be placed on effectively the individuals in the management company, in the investment manager, to make sure, well, if there's, I'll have to check that these assets are eligible, I'll have to check we're not breaching any investment restrictions. But you could write all that into smart contracts and protocols, and then the fund would not quite run autonomously, but you'd certainly have a much closer, from a regulatory point of view, control over it, because there isn't the same possibility for individuals to misbehave or take liberties with the rules that the regulator expects to be complied with.
Yes, I totally agree. So when it comes to that is superb when it comes to the application of smart contracts. The only problem that they have, and not quite the only problem, like I had alluded to, the blockchain and smart contracts, they are cross-jurisdictional. So you will have jurisdictional issues. So let's say with the Financial Action Task Force, there's an expectation you have to register if you are a VASP, or let's say there's this thing called the travel rule. So if some sort of transaction is being conducted, there's a reporting requirement within the next jurisdiction. But there are some countries that are not part of this jurisdiction, or they're expected to be, but they're not following the regulation. So the enforcement of this regulation is tough. And also the legal precedent, or we don't have legal precedent per se, maybe one or two, but you don't have proper guidance in terms of where this technology is, because you see, innovation is always ahead of technology. So we still need case law that tells you what to do when you're interacting with the blockchain, and if it's within the other jurisdiction, what law or regulation does the other jurisdiction apply? And even in England, when it comes to like cryptocurrencies, for example, the law is not so tight. It's sort of ambiguous. So there was recently, was it a consultation that came out, and they're saying they will extend it to apply to crypto assets in whole. But this just shows you, like, smart contracts, decentralized finance, yes, they're moving very fast, but the law is also moving quite slow.
Nothing new there, Brian. Let's wrap it up, because I'm conscious that time is against us. But the issues you've identified, Brian, sound like ones that are fixable over time with some effort and experience, as opposed to irresolvable. And if that's the case, where do you see us in kind of 5 years' time when it comes to the deployment of blockchain and smart contracts? Will everybody more or less kind of have an understanding of what those terms mean and we'll see them in action in their lives?
Right. So I think in 5 years' time, we'll be light years ahead compared to now, because there's been more uptake, and the consumers, rather the investors in blockchain and in cryptocurrency, people want this thing. And you can see it's let's say when the internet came in the 90s, and let's say the 2000 .com boom, we are at such a position right now. So blockchain is still at a very infant stage, but it's growing, and the things that it can do are disruptive. So you just need to have this understanding, consumer awareness, institutional awareness that allows ethical adoption. And just to round it up again, this is where my study comes in as a PhD, the theoretical adoption of blockchain in the public and, let's say, private sector, what it can actually do. So the technology, it's now here and it won't go anywhere. So what can we do as regulators to make it friendly and to protect the consumers? So let's say protecting consumers when an exchange has been hacked, or the code has failed, or something similar. So what can we do to protect the people? Governments have been shying away and having this sort of fear-mongering campaign saying, if you invest in crypto, if you're doing this, we are not going to be involved in that. You know, it's a sort of fear tactic, but it shouldn't be a fear tactic. And institutions should come together, like traditional finance, Danny, your world, and let's say the decentralized finance world. People need to come together and figure the way forward. So if we move in such a joint approach, in 5 years' time, we're going to be very far. And also the discussions around the central bank digital currencies will be more advanced than they are now, because people are still on this, jittery, not sure where everything is going. Yeah, but let's move in a joint approach and work together, and things will be better off.
I think so. I think that there is enough capital, both in terms of financial, but especially in terms of brain power of very clever people who are putting their efforts into developments and innovations in this whole sector. So I think it's inevitable that there will be huge advancements sooner rather than later, and the regulation and oversight will catch up. Well, it'll never get too, but it'll go far enough that it'll allow mass adoption. And in our next episode, Brian, because I definitely want to get you back, I'm very interested in all of this from an ethics perspective. So
okay,
head under your hat and we catch up and chat about that next time.
Thank you so much, Danny. It was lovely being on the show.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate your time and your insights on the show. Thank you very much, listeners, for tuning into this episode. We'll catch you next time on the Aquest Podcast.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.